Have you ever wondered what truly terrifies a narcissist in the dark corners of their own soul? It's not ordinary failure, it's not simple rejection. It's a horrifying nightmare, an abyss they'd rather die than face. Today, we're going to rip away the glamorous mask they hide behind and expose the shocking truth about what really happens when a narcissist's world comes crashing down. Their worst nightmare, the moment when everything they've built turns to ashes. But this isn't just a story about their downfall. It's a story about how they drag you into their storm, abuse you, manipulate you, and use you as fuel to keep that nightmare from becoming their reality. They thrive on admiration, turning life into a game they always need to win. But when they lose, when the spotlight fades, what's left behind? A cold, dark truth, more terrifying than anything you could imagine. I'm not here to glorify them. I'm here to show you who they really are. Narcissistic abusers who build empires on the pain of others, only to eventually face a nightmare they can never escape. Get ready. We're about to embark on a journey that's not for those who shy away from truth. Because by the end, you won't just understand a narcissist's worst nightmare, you'll see clearly how they made your life a part of it. And the first question is this: what makes them willing to do anything just to avoid facing themselves? Meet Vincent King, a name that could belong to anyone in your life, someone who's always at the center, always shining, always making you feel small in their presence. Vincent isn't just an ordinary person. He doesn't live like you or me, with days marked by simple, honest moments. He's a phenomenon, a storm that pulls every gaze toward him, a man who walks into a room and sucks the air out of it, leaving you wondering if you even exist. He smiles with the confidence of someone who believes he's untouchable. He speaks with the tone of a man who's never known self-doubt. He moves like the world was made to bow at his feet, and for a long time, maybe it did. But Vincent King isn't who you think he is. He's not the true king of anything. He's a master illusionist, living off a fabricated empire he calls his false self, a flawless version of himself, never wrong, never weak, never vulnerable. What is this false self? It's not the real Vincent. It's a statue he carved out himself, shiny, impressive, but hollow inside. An image he desperately needs you to believe is real, because if you don't, if you see through the glittering mask, he crumbles. And to keep that fragile empire standing, Vincent exploits everything and everyone around him. He doesn't just crave attention, he demands it. He doesn't just want your praise, he manipulates you into giving it. He doesn't just want you near, he turns you into a tool to reinforce his image. Think about those exaggerated stories Vincent told, those victories he never truly earned, those grand achievements he only imagined. He didn't tell them to entertain you, he told them to impress you, to keep you looking at him with awe, to make you a part of his false empire. But when you don't respond the way he expects, when you don't clap, when you don't bow, he changes. He turns cold, hostile, ready to tear you down, just to keep his statue from cracking. He'll blame you, make you feel like you're the one at fault, and do whatever it takes to pull you back into serving his illusion. This is narcissistic abuse, a game where Vincent must always win, and you must always lose. He doesn't care about your feelings, he doesn't care about your pain. You're just a brick in his wall, a drop of fuel in his fire, a tool to keep him from facing his ultimate nightmare. But what is that nightmare? To understand it, we need to look at the one thing holding Vincent's fake empire together, the one thing he cannot live without. Vincent isn't just an abuser, he's a machine fueled by one thing, and that fuel has a name: narcissistic supply. Narcissistic supply isn't the ordinary kind of recognition you or I might receive and feel content with. It's not a kind word from a friend or a nod of approval from a loved one. No, this is a pathological hunger, an insatiable craving, a need so intense that Vincent would destroy everything around him just to satisfy it. Picture Vincent standing in a crowd, raising his hand like a god, his voice echoing with authority, but the moment someone turns their back, his smile disappears. He doesn't just want attention, he needs it like air. He craves praise, admiration, worshipful gazes, like it's the very blood running through his veins. And he'll do anything to get it. Sometimes, Vincent will charm you with sweet words, flattery, and compliments designed to make you feel obligated to respond. He'll tell grand, exaggerated stories, victories that never happened, tales that only exist in his mind, all so you'll be impressed. So you'll become the audience in a play he's directing. But when charm isn't enough, when you don't respond the way he wants, the mask slips. Vincent becomes aggressive, manipulative, willing to threaten and destroy just to keep his narcissistic supply flowing. He'll shout, "Look at me, tell me I'm the best." He'll guilt-trip you, making you feel like you're the problem for not loving him enough. This isn't confidence, it's desperation. Vincent doesn't merely want narcissistic supply, he needs it, like an addict needs a fix to keep from spiraling into madness. And you are his supply. He doesn't care how you feel. He doesn't care how much pain he causes you. You're just a tool, something to prop up his false empire, to keep him from facing his darkest nightmare. Think about it. Narcissistic supply is the dark fuel that powers Vincent's machine. Every compliment you give is a drop of gasoline to keep his fire burning. Every admiring glance is a spark to keep it from going out. But what's the cost of that fire? Your freedom, your self-worth, your sense that you exist for more than just serving him. Have you ever known someone like Vincent? Someone who lives to be adored, who makes you feel like you're never good enough unless you're clapping for them. They pull you into a game you never agreed to play, and when you try to walk away, they drag you back in, either with sweet words or ruthless aggression. But what happens when the fuel runs out? When you refuse to be their tool any longer, when the spotlight fades and Vincent has nothing left to hold on to? That's when the real nightmare begins. Vincent's life was once an untouchable empire, a world where he was the king and everyone else merely subjects bowing before him. But now, that empire is beginning to crack. One day, everything changed. The lies he used to build his image started to unravel. Someone who was once an ally stood up and pointed a finger at him, calling him a fraud. Those who once admired him began turning away, whispering behind his back, laughing at the arrogance he once wore like a crown. This is what we call a narcissistic injury. Sharp, piercing blows to the fragile empire Vincent built. Each criticism is a tear in the walls he constructed. Each doubtful glance is a brick falling out of place. Every turned back is a direct hit to his belief that he was untouchable. Vincent wasn't prepared for this. He had lived his entire life bathed in constant admiration, in endless praise, in a spotlight he believed would shine on him forever. He thought as long as he had enough narcissistic supply, enough people bowing before him, he could keep his worst nightmare at bay. But he was wrong. His empire wasn't as strong as he believed. It was built on lies, on manipulation, on the pain of those he abused, and now, as the truth surfaces, it begins to crumble. Vincent reacts the only way he knows how, with rage. He yells at those who used to be friends, blaming them for not being loyal enough, for not admiring him enough. He tries to manipulate, to pull them back in, to use aggression to force them into serving him again. But no one listens anymore, no one fears him anymore. And when his rage fails, Vincent sinks into another abyss, an anxious silence, a fear he can't even name. He starts to doubt, not others, but himself. If they don't need me, then who am I, he wonders, and the answer makes him tremble. This is the beginning of the nightmare. Vincent is no longer the invincible king. He becomes irritable, unstable, quick to explode over the smallest things. He can't sleep, can't eat, can't look in the mirror without feeling a vague, creeping terror inside. But the worst is yet to come. The cracks in his false empire don't just expose weakness, they expose a truth he's buried for years. Behind those walls, There's no strength, no glory, only a flood of darkness. The emotions he spent a lifetime running from: shame, fear, worthlessness. The voices he once tried to silence now scream in his mind, "You're not good enough. You're a failure. You don't deserve anything." And they don't come from others. They come from him, from the dark corners of his own soul that he tried to cover up with your admiration, with your pain. Now, with the narcissistic supply gone and the injuries piling up, his false empire can no longer stand. And when it finally collapses, Vincent will face his worst nightmare. Not the world's rejection, but the truth about who he really is. The empire has fallen. There's nothing left to hold it back. The flood of repressed emotions, the very ones Vincent buried for years, comes crashing through, destroying everything he ever built. This is a narcissist's worst nightmare. Not just an ordinary failure, not just a stumble he can recover from. This is the complete unraveling of the person he tried so hard to become. A collapse so profound, he'd rather die than face it. It doesn't happen all at once. It begins slowly, like a light drizzle before the storm. First comes the depletion of narcissistic supply. Vincent grows irritable, unstable, and explosive over the smallest things. He lashes out at former allies, blaming them for not loving him enough, for not being loyal enough. He tries to manipulate, tries to intimidate them back into his orbit. But no one fears him anymore. Then comes the silence. A heavy, anxious, depressive silence. He sits alone, holding his head in his hands, asking, "What did I do wrong? Why don't they need me anymore?" But no answer brings him comfort. And then the real nightmare arrives. The total collapse isn't just a loss, it's annihilation. Vincent is no longer the king he imagined himself to be. He is no longer the center of attention. He is just a man. A broken, frightened man drowning in the voices inside his head that he can no longer silence. "You're worthless," they whisper. "You're a failure. You were never good enough." These words don't come from others. They come from within him, from the darkest corners of his soul that he tried to hide behind your admiration, your pain, and the abuse he inflicted on you. Vincent once believed that if he could gather enough narcissistic supply, if enough people bowed to him, he could forever keep the flood behind the wall. But he was wrong. His false empire was never strong enough. It never could be. And now, as it crumbles, he doesn't just lose the admiration of others, he loses himself. Here's the shocking truth. A narcissist's worst nightmare isn't losing the spotlight. It isn't being rejected by others. It's the moment they have to face the truth that they are nothing, that everything they built was a lie, and everyone they used was just a tool to delay that truth. Vincent once thought you, his family, his friends, those closest to him, only existed to serve him, to fuel his false empire, to keep his nightmare from becoming real. But now, with everything in ruins, he's left with a painful realization. You don't need him, and maybe you never did. Now Vincent stands in the rubble of his false empire. He is no longer the arrogant king, no longer the center of attention. He is just a man, a broken, wounded man who no longer knows who he is without someone to abuse, someone to manipulate, someone to keep his nightmare at bay. He stands at a crossroads. One path leads to redemption, a road where he must face the flood of emotions, acknowledge the harm he's caused, and learn to live without using others to feel like he exists. That path is not easy. It requires him to accept that he's not special, not perfect, that he is simply human, a truth he has spent his whole life running from. But there's another path, the easier, more familiar one. He could wait, quietly trying to rebuild his false empire, hunting for new victims to manipulate and exploit, to keep the nightmare from returning. He could try to reconstruct the wall, even though it's already cracked, and continue playing the game he's played his whole life. What path will Vincent choose? We don't know. And maybe that's not what matters, because the real question isn't what he will do, it's what you will do when you encounter a narcissist like him in your own life. They may be someone very close to you, a family member who constantly demands attention, a friend who turns you into a tool to maintain their image, a leader who drains your energy just to prop up their false empire. They abuse you, manipulate you, and make you feel like you're never good enough unless you're serving them. But here's the shocking truth you need to know. You don't have to be a part of their nightmare. They are not the center of your life. You are. You hold the power. You can step out of the shadow they cast and reclaim your own life. Understanding a narcissist's worst nightmare isn't about pitying them. It's not about spending your life staring at the wreckage they've left behind, wondering what they'll do next. It's about seeing that, no matter how brightly they once shined, no matter how skillfully they manipulated, it was all an illusion, and you are not obligated to hold up their crumbling empire. They may fall, but you don't have to fall with them. You can rise, walk away, and build a life that isn't shaped by their abuse. That is true power, not in serving them, not in bowing to them, but in knowing that you are enough, even when they have no one left to control. Vincent has fallen, his false empire lies in ashes, but you're still standing in the aftermath of the storm he left behind. The question isn't whether he'll rise again, it's how you'll protect yourself from the wreckage, from the sharp, lingering fragments of the narcissistic abuse he once inflicted on you. Today I want to give you the most powerful weapons, not for revenge, but to build an unshakable fortress that shields your soul from people like Vincent when their nightmare comes crashing down. First, understand this. The fall of a narcissist doesn't always mark the end of their abuse. It can be the beginning of something even more dangerous. The renowned psychologist Carl Gustav Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." For narcissists, when their false empire collapses, the shadows of their unconscious, shame, fear, rage, rise to the surface, and they'll do anything to dump that pain onto you. They might try to manipulate you again, shift blame, or even pretend to be weak and wounded to pull you back into their spiral. Don't let it happen. Recognizing their tactics is the first step to cutting the cord they once used to bind you. Next, build ironclad boundaries. Not paper walls, not fragile fences, but solid, unbreakable lines. Dr. Brené Brown, a leading expert on vulnerability and courage, says, "Clear boundaries are the most compassionate way to love yourself and others." When Vincent, or any narcissist, crumbles, they will try to invade your space, draining your energy to rebuild their false self. Don't pity them. Say no with strength. Refuse to be their source of narcissistic supply and hold your ground, even if they scream or beg. Boundaries aren't selfish, they are survival. Now, build your inner defense by redefining your self-worth. Psychologist Abraham Maslow, father of the hierarchy of needs, emphasized, "One can only become what one is capable of becoming when they are not dominated by the approval of others." Narcissists like Vincent made you believe your worth came from serving them, but that was their greatest lie. You are not their tool. You are not the fuel to feed their fire. Take time to hear your own inner voice. Nurture the parts of you that feel strong, independent, and worthy, because you are, no matter what happens to them. Finally, don't fight this battle alone. Find allies, find people who understand narcissistic abuse and who will stand beside you. Sigmund Freud, the pioneer of psychoanalysis, once said, "In isolation, we are more likely to fall prey to the ghosts in our minds. When a narcissist falls, they often try to isolate you with guilt, shame, or loneliness. It's their final weapon. So, reach out, lean on friends, family, or a therapist to reinforce your strength. You don't have to endure this alone. There is an entire army out there ready to help you stand strong against their nightmare. Protecting yourself from a narcissist's collapse is not weakness. It's a declaration of power. It's how you take back control of your life. Vincent may have crumbled, but you don't have to become a victim of the rubble. Stand tall, build your fortress, and move forward. Not for them, but for yourself. And if you're ready to go further, If you want to learn how to deal with people like Vincent, join our community today. The sign-up link is in the video description. Click it and become part of a growing movement of people who refuse to be broken by narcissistic abuse. We are stronger together, and I want you standing with me in this battle for truth and freedom. Vincent has vanished into his own nightmare, but his story still echoes. We've seen the shocking truth about how he used others to build his false empire, and we've witnessed his worst nightmare, the moment everything turned to ash. But the most important thing we take away is not Vincent's collapse. It's the question he leaves behind. What will you do when you face a narcissist in your own life? If you've ever been a victim of narcissistic abuse, if you've ever felt yourself being pulled into someone's false empire, share your story in the comments below. I want to hear it, and so do others. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and join me as we continue to uncover the hidden truths of the human soul. Thank you for being here, for walking with me through these dark corners. We'll meet again soon.